6:30, we'll call meeting order. Start with pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very much. Everybody's here except for Eric, who let us know he's not going to be available tonight. So we'll move on to the minutes of June 18th meeting. They're in the package. I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions, deletions, etc.? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? They are approved. Public comment, as far as I see, we have no public in the room, we have no public online. We will keep moving. Madam Treasurer, it is you.
All right. Welcome, everybody. So we will move on to our executive summary as of June 30th. So fiscal year to date, the town has received revenue of $52,934,813, or 105.3% of the total amount of $50,276,744 budgeted for fiscal year 24. When comparing our performance to last fiscal year, we are 0.5% behind this time last year. Next is the authorized investment section. In the last month, the STIP rate has stayed totally steady. So it's at 5.56% today. 5.56% it was last month. Today it is at 5.42%. And Webster's rate is at 5.55, which they give us in arrears. So the investment committee, we have already booked our bond ladder for fiscal year 25 with an income revenue estimation of $547,985 booked out of the $600,000 budgeted for fiscal year 25. And my expectation is we will probably exceed that next year. That's my personal expectation. So, and the investment committee is already thinking ahead to fiscal year 26 regarding our bond ladder. So we're always thinking and moving ahead. Now we're going to move to the pension plan. At the end of June, we received our report from Morgan Stanley, our investment manager. The town pension plan is up 11.01% fiscal year to date versus its benchmark of 13.18%. Over the 3-year horizon, the town plan has returned 1.31% versus its benchmark of 2.97%. The fire department pension plan is up 10.87% fiscal year to date and has returned 1.71% over the 3-year horizon versus its benchmark of 2.97%. The Pension and Benefits Board reviewed their investment policy statement at their June meeting. The primary discussion revolved around, have we met our investment objective? The answer to that was yes, to pay the pensioners. And then the secondary objective was, are we meeting the benchmark? They're having our investment advisor run new asset allocations to make sure that we are properly allocated in the portfolio. And this is something that isn't done every year or so. And Mr. Nichols, when he comes next month, will be able to address that and explain that better than I ever could. So the pension board will be following up with this discussion amongst themselves at their September meeting. They take July and August off, and they meet again in September. Are there any questions? I did want to ask, did you have any questions on our bond ladder, and are there any questions on the pension?
Not for me. Anybody else? George?
Just a quick question. I haven't actually looked back all the different months. But first of all, I
Sure.
appreciate these detailed reports. Coming back to the pension component, because I haven't made one here from the last summary of the minutes that Jerry sent out. The changing value was $506,000, $500,000 or so. And this time the changing value was about $2 million. Most of it going up, but both times going up. But I guess what things asking is the funded ratio isn't changing.
No.
Okay.
That report's run once a year by our actuary, and that funded ratio will stay the same. It's taken at a point in time, done at the end of the fiscal year.
I see.
And we will, right now, we're preparing all of the census for all of our employees. We send it into them. It takes them a long time to do the actuarial calculations, and then around February, they'll come into the pension board, and then we, as a pension board, or they, as a pension board, look at all of the assumptions. Maybe they'll change the discount rate, tables of other things that they use. And once that's all agreed upon, that's when the final funded ratio is calculated. So next year will be calculated. And if we have a strong end in a strong year, which looks like we're going to, we have the results there, that will probably help the funded ratio go up. The investment performance is what I'm speaking to. It's a strong year.
So the pensions get paid out, maybe I should wait until the pensions get paid out every month as is due. So your ending balance this time of 27.7 million is the net after paying out whatever pension you do for that month.
Yeah.
And so, just ballparkish, just this month, we went up almost 10%, 8% or so.
The market.
Stock market.
Right,
So it's
right,
market.
yes, but then I don't know how that translates to funded ratio, right? I mean, that would be a pretty significant.
Well, the funded ratio is just, it's not gonna move every month. They calculate, the actuary calculates the funded ratio, and that's just information for you. The other numbers on this page are all about how the portfolio is moving. So they're not gonna be, one is calculated, one we look at every single month and it moves, and the other one we look at once a year. So probably the funded ratio is calculated by the actuary. The assumed rate is determined by the pension board and is used in the actuarial calculation. And then everything up from that point above is how our performance is every month by as reported by Morgan Stanley.
I mean, there'll be some hypothetical number with a real number where using the assumed rate of 6.75, the funded ratio will be 100% or.
It'll ultimately, because we fully fund the pension, we have schedules, and when the actuary maybe comes in to visit y'all, because the Morgan Stanley isn't going to take this, they show at what point in time, 20 years out, 10 years out, it does move to 100, all else being equal.
Feels like we're close.
We're close. We're very
close.
Right, we're close, but if the stock market were to go down 25%,
Right.
that would change
Yes,
things.
absolutely.
And it's been a crazy run. It's been good times, right? So.
Is there a benchmark funded rate for towns our size?
There's a funded ratio in general for pension plans. Anything above 80% is considered well funded. And we do look at our investment performance versus other Connecticut municipalities, and we're always in the top quartile.
Thank you.
I'm sure Kevin will mention that next month.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're gonna be very happy with Kevin's analysis, and he's very good.
Any other questions? All right, page 2.
All right, so, again,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Carl, please.
So, with regard to interest income, Barbara just mentioned a little bit of how we're booking and, with the bond ladder and everything. So it is leading to large surpluses because we are getting very good interest rates. I just want to remind everybody that there was a long period of time where we were not getting this kind of income. And in fact, one year, I think we got $87,000 in investment income, which is, and now we're like getting over $1 million in investment income. So what we did, we used to plan on booking about $150,000 in investment income. That's for many years, that the number was stacked at 150. It went down, we adjusted it down when interest rates really were in the tank. And then now we're in this period of like, oh my God, 5%. And not only that, our rainy day fund is healthy and a lot of our other funds are healthy. So we're making 5% plus on all these funds. So we're booking a lot of income. We raised that portion of the budget, the revenue budget, from 87,000 and what it was at 150. We're now putting in 600,000 as investment income. This town has never done that. Now, should we go to $1 million? Okay, can we say let's put $1 million for revenue income next year? Because we're probably going to get there. But if interest rates go to, God forbid, 1% again, then we're going to be chasing that in the mill rate. So the $600,000 number is a relatively conservative number based on interest rates normalizing a little bit more. They're normalized right now, but let's say going to 3%, we still feel we can hit that $600,000 number. So it is conservative and it is throwing off a lot of extra revenue that does lead to a surplus for the town, sometimes a larger surplus for the town. So I've said it before, I'm just kind of saying it again for context historically. So that's all, that was a comment.
Good, thanks.
Well, because we're also, just to go off of Carl, we're making so much money just on our Webster account and our STIF account. I mean, we're making all this nice cash flow off of our money that we don't even have to play around with bond ladder for some of our other money that we're making. So it's helping us create this great interest income and everything's going our way. Let's keep it that way. Okay, so I like to just quickly go over, all the monies belonging to the town. So as of June 30th, total cash balances were 34.7 million, total pension balances were 29.5 million, for total assets under management of 64.2 million. So page 2 of the treasurer's report show our revenues broken out in more detail. Tax revenues were 191,329 for the month, bringing the fiscal year to date total of 49,175,019, or 102.1% of the amount budgeted for fiscal year 24. So thank you, residents, for paying your taxes. We collected $100,057 in LOSUP money from the state of Connecticut and $46,717 in state shared revenues from the state of Connecticut as well. In terms of local revenues, the town collected $557,628 in local revenues, or 105.3% of our fiscal year 24 budget. We collected $79,841 of interest income, for total fiscal year 24, $1,223,579. Recording fees, building permits, and Harvey's speech all led the way with the most revenue and exceeded their budget amounts for the fiscal year. And mini golf fees were in there with $19,965 for the month of June, and they came to a 95% of their fiscal 24 budgeted amount. So good for everybody. And as of June 30th, we have $2,658,069 of surplus collected. Hopefully I'm accurate, or maybe we have a little more. That's it. Any questions?
I have just a couple of questions. I think it could be a timing issue. There's potentially revenue that we would declare as 24 revenue that still doesn't show up on this, and I'm looking at the beach passes and the golf fees, where we are down from last year. But I'm just wondering whether or not there would still be more coming in that would be part of fiscal year 24.
Yes, because, it's gonna be close. We try to get everything in because this meeting was a little bit later in the month. But yes, there can be some more, that may come struggling in, but it's not gonna be much more than this. This is probably fairly close to accurate.
So that's almost 25% down in beach pass revenue,
39 versus 45.
39 versus 52.
But Harvey's,
52 last year.
yeah. And, Harvey's is,
Yeah, Harvey's.
Harvey's is a gangbusters.
But that's not the
I
town.
know.
yeah.
That means
Well-
like town residents are not buying beach passes as much. Which I don't.
Yeah, just to
Yeah, they
curiosity.
can still, because
The
that
town
happens
beach
a
is
little bit.
packed every time you go to it.
That happens a little bit in fiscal year 24, it happens a little bit in fiscal year 25, so we're gonna, I've been turned down a couple of times, it's a timing issue.
Yeah, it's okay. No, just curious.
Yeah.
Are there other questions for the judge? George?
Actually, a question back to you, Carl, and you, Deanne. I have to apologize. Finance is not my thing, and I'm asking a question for two finance experts here, so this is gonna sound so dumb, actually. So, my apologies. Right. So right now the interest rate is very high, and so and so you're concerned about how to manage this because at some point the interest rate won't be 5% and so on. And from a consumer point of view, I would rather not have a interest rate of 5%, right? So everything else is very expensive. So, but again, just very naively, there are longer term investments, bond-like, that would have lower interest, but you can have them for longer term. And so do you guys have any say in terms of how these are invested? Because then you can write it out, just say, okay, I won't take the 5 now, but I'll take, I'm gonna make up a number,
Right.
4 or 10
For
years.
10 years, right?
Right.
But we have a finance approved investment policy, and I think the maximum that we can go out is 3 years with an average life, meaning the average maturity of the bonds at 18 months. So we don't want to have, and the thinking behind the investment policy statement, not specifically for this environment, is that we don't want to have anybody thinking, oh, we'll put all the town's money out for 10 years and then we run into a liquidity crisis. Now, we can come back to the Board of Finance if we ever wanted to do a program of sorts, to lock some stuff in for 5 years or whatever and get an exemption to the policy. And maybe we could do something like that with our reserves that we have, because we typically don't touch those. But we are booked, as Barbara said, we've almost got our $600,000 booked for this fiscal year. We can start fiscal year 27, and then we could lock it in for a few years.
So I think what you see is municipalities or governments may not be doing that, but insurance companies are. So I sit on the Connecticut Interlocal Risk Management Board. I'm the chair of the investment committee, and we are now seeking more duration at a slightly lower rate. But that's an insurance company.
Right.
I don't know that government should be, and Leanne has a lot of experience in government, but from a liquidity point of view, I don't know that we want to be extending duration, but we could certainly look at that. I don't know. I've never studied that statewide or.
But we are doing it in our pension plan, extending duration.
Our pension plan, we
does
are
do that.
extending duration now, yes.
We would have to be very careful. I mean, maybe going out after we finish fiscal year 2025, go out to fiscal year 26, then we're, have 2 to 3 years. We'd still be in policy. That would still be reasonable as long as we don't tie up our money, because you never know.
Understood.
You never know. We don't want to do that necessarily, especially when we're borrowing from ourselves to pay for our DPW purchases. So we're saying to ourselves, well, instead of financing at 6%, let's borrow from ourselves. So we're kind of doing it on the opposite side.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd just like to comment that many years ago,
we had a different treasurer and, not treasurer, finance person. And we were not getting anywhere near, the job that we're getting done today is much better than was happening with the previous person.
It's a market, I
We
think.
had
Yeah.
an account down the street at the bank and we were getting nothing.
So two things, I think, the interest rate environment might be a little bit better, but we are a lot more active, Brad, I think to your point, we are more active in managing the money. That is definitely true.
We've used STIF, the short-term investment fund, which can invest in things that municipalities cannot. And then we benchmark the rate at Webster to the STIF rate 1 month in arrears. And the other bank that we used to be with would pay below market rates. And we'd have a majority of our investments there. So there is a slight difference in strategy.
Madam Treasurer, thank you. Finance Director?
All right, so this is June 30. We're not done with our fiscal year yet. It more so on the expenditure side than on the revenue side. The revenue side is pretty well set, and as the treasurer mentioned, we have about $2.7 million worth of revenue surplus. We will have, I think that we're going to have a small amount of an expenditure surplus too, so we will have a relatively large surplus again to do things with at the end of the fiscal year. Just to point something out that only happens this time of the year, if you look at the first section where it shows our progress so far in fiscal year to date, we've expended 94.2% of our budget, and the last month we had a lot of bills coming in for June, so you know it's going to move closer to 100%. But then you look at fiscal year 23, and it looks like we overspent our budget at 105%. And what that recognizes is that the surplus that we spent kind of is included in that number. So we did not overspend our budget last year. We spent, when we booked the surplus, it looks like an expenditure. So
The surplus expenditures,
the surplus, when we moved all the money to all the different things.
yes.
It looks like we expended it, but it was appropriated, not expended. So I just wanted to point that out in case anyone had any questions. Moving on to page 3, since we didn't have a meeting earlier this month, we didn't have anything new to report. In terms of our cash flow summary, again, another item that happens this time of year is that in June we get advanced collections on this year's, the fiscal year 25's tax receipts. So you can see our general fund, we had an inflow of almost $1.5 million, which typically we spend about $3 million a month in expenditures. So that was made up of the $600,000 that we received in revenues for the month of June and $4.3 million in early tax collections. So those will be booked officially in July, and that's about what it was last year. So we are getting off to a very solid tax collection season.
It is interesting. There are people who actually come to the tax collector and say, I didn't get my tax bill yet, and like, it's June 17th. And they come in the next day and pay they did get it and they pay their bill, It's, and we pre-collected, that number has been very steady for many years. It's, 4.5, somewhere in there, million that we collect in June and then have to book it in July.
Were they all over 80?
Yeah.
God bless them, they don't like a bill hanging around.
It burns a hole in their pocket apparently. So.
In terms of the cash flow summary below, under capital funds, minus 116,000. We actually had some ARPA funds that were moved around, that we had a lot of appropriations that were approved at the May 28th town meeting, so we moved them in June. But against that, we also had the Main Street connection. That project is going across the street, so we paid some bills that brought that into the negative. On the reserve funds, minus 198,000. That also was approved, removed some of the money for the Long Island Sound grant match out of the reserves and into another account. And we also did some other projects around Town Hall, including the installation of the proximity readers. That was a project that was appropriated with the fiscal 23 surplus. And then on, there was no major changes except for those in the funds, the capital funds, and we're almost fully expended in our capital expenditures to date. So I did want to point out on the last page where we have the list of all of the funds. This is the last month, and I want to point out some departments that are over their budget. And I'm going to repeat because I do this every single month, so forgive me because the list is getting slightly a few more, a little bit longer. So assessment appeals is because we had our eval this year, so we spent about $6,000 more. It says it's 187% of budget, so that number looks a little bit large just because it's a small budget number. Retiree health insurance is down slightly. We're about $4,000 over budget. And again, we had, does everybody know where I am?
Last
Make
page,
sure.
right?
Okay, yep. Because we had some unexpected retirements that caused that to nudge over. Registrar of voters, actually we sent out emails on one of the topics was the registrar of voters and why it went over last year because of the early voting requirements. So that it's about $10,000 over budget at 114%. And zoning and ZBA, a few more down the list is about not very much over, but percentage wise it's a little bit larger. And they had some legal bills that they had to pay that caused those budgets to go over. Economic development slightly over, and again, the director of economic development has been assisting with many things going on in this town, grants, ARPA, economic development, and that all has been discussed. Those hours have been increased for fiscal year 25, so that should resolve itself. Engineering 4305 is about $5,000 over budget. Again, all of these projects that we're working on require engineering, so we did go over a little bit there. And social services, waste collection is over a little bit too. That the price just went up for waste in general after it was budgeted. Down below is social services. That actually is not going to be over budget, but sometimes what happens at this time of the year is that they have encumbrances outstanding that they're not going to actually have an expenditure against for one reason or another, and I did check and that's the case there. So that will come into line after we clear up all the outstanding encumbrances after fiscal year end. When we get to mini golf, that one actually is $32,000 over, and recreation and mini golf was one department. These are two sub-departments of one department, and we did actually find a large $10,000 bill that was misbooked, and so we fixed that, but still, this one is kind of close to the $25,000. We're not done with all of our expenses yet. They still have some salaries because they worked the last weekend that have to be reallocated back to last fiscal year. So if this one goes over 25,000, we will come back with a recommendation, either a transfer or an appropriation, whatever the case may be. And you know, the reason was the staffing. And Ray hasn't gotten back to me fully on this, but staffing for the mini golf was one of the reasons for the overage. And with regard to the parks, those are also the two parks is one sub-department is the Vicky Duffy parks and the other parks, so we would combine them together. They're over about 22,000. They're probably gonna stay that way. And they're not going to, I do not believe they are going to trigger the $25,000 mark. And I'm hopeful that the recreation will not trigger the $25,000 thing, but I can't say for sure, so we'll have to wait and see on that. So that's the other news before I take, if anyone has any questions. It's just that the auditors are here now and they're closing out our books. They will be back again in November to finalize everything. So it's been a pretty busy couple of weeks that we've had here.
So, questions for the finance director?
Just a quick question, I think I'm following this right. The PD general expenditures,
Yeah.
Was that explained? And sorry, I missed that. It's
So-
33%.
Oh, yes. I probably shouldn't have glossed over that because that's our largest budget, so I apologize for that. But PD is 3 sub-departments. 4201 is the department, and then field service is the salaries and benefits for the police officers. Support service is the salaries and benefits for everybody else, which is the dispatchers and some of the clerical workers that there. And then PD expenditures is for, the taking care of the building, the vehicles, gas, supplies, everything. And this is not untypical that they have used some of the money that they saved in the other 2 line items and spent it on expenditures. So, but if you were to look at, the reason why I didn't report on it, which was your initial question, is because if you were to look at the department as a whole, it is not over.
George?
I'll hit this one first because you just mentioned it. I appreciate your explanation. I'm just remembering back from when we were evaluating these departments' budget. And towards the end of the book, where they listed all the different expenses. That's every single item except for workers' comp, is the exact same as the previous one. This would seem to imply, perhaps maybe I'm wrong, that it wasn't the case. So
That we always, number one, budget full employment, the Board of Ed, full employment, town, full employment. And so by not moving those expenditures year after year after year, the reasoning is that it can be better managed. So if there is vacancies, then they can use those funds to purchase things. That's the way he looks at it. It's a management tool. But you are correct. If you look at it another way, perhaps prices have gone up, all kinds of things have happened, they're more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in addition, when I finish closing out the books, you're gonna see another memo that's gonna come back, and I don't know if you were here last year or not, George and Megan, where the outside services, we will be returning money back into the police budget for fuel and car usage, and we put it against fuel. We put against the hours that they earn for vehicles against fuel and maintenance of the cars. And, so that's gonna actually further reduce that cost.
Can I just, it would be helpful to me to have a refresher on kind of who is in a position to approve overages at what level. Because I know I was in an entirely different environment. I made a misstatement that got reported back to Carl as the misstatement that I made, and it was inaccurate. And so I was embarrassed, and I think, okay, I need to learn more about this. So we have a, whether written or unwritten policy prior to the next agenda item around the $25,000. we have a policy that says that if there is an expenditure out of capital non-recurring at 1 cent or more, that requires town meeting. Is there, in between those two things, is there other policies that say you cannot make an expenditure, capital operation, otherwise that is not been budgeted to a certain, I mean, I asked that question because, I've raised the same issues that George just raised, and whether or not it's in public safety, public works, any of these kind of larger budgets. It seems to me that a purchase of, last year they purchased, I think, additional weapons, or new weapons, which absolutely fine. But to me, that was a capital expenditure that probably exceeded $100,000. And outside of a report to the police commission, that was the only approval. Whereas other entities have to go through a series of hoops to be able to spend more than $25,000. And I'm just not trying to figure it out. Where does all this come together?
So many questions.
Yeah, so,
Where to
So-
start?
to be fair, I don't want to say it is, just the police department. I mean.
And I'm sorry, I just
Right.
shut up.
So, it may be that, in the transfer station, a bin, goes down or gets a hole in it. And Bill's like, I was down a man, is it okay to buy a $9,000 bin? So I can keep the trash coming in, and I'm not gonna say no to him, it's in the department. And he's allowed to buy it. So, there is some moving money around within the department, but not amongst departments.
But is there any upper limit around?
No,
that?
not, well, I mean, is there an upper limit? It would be rare that we are exceeding, I mean, it's rare that we'd be looking at numbers like 75,000 or 100,000. So I would say the answer to the question is no, but it would be unusual within any of our departments. Maybe the police department being the largest, it might be less rare. But, when, in public works, when so much of it is strictly personnel, it would be very unusual for Bill to say, hey, I'm gonna buy a new $100,000 truck and just do that. So it's more maybe some equipment that he needs. Now, is that a difference without a distinction? Maybe it is. But the answer to the question, I guess, is no. If, coming back to the question. So could that be reported on? Maybe it should be reported on to the Board of Finance saying, hey, maybe it's quarterly. Hey, this capital expenditure was made outside of the capital non-recurring policy or outside of my capital budget. I needed the item, the money was there, we talked about it and it was approved. Now, we're just not gonna run up against anything that's ginormous, but there could be something along those lines, I suppose.
Yeah, but it's not that, doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
that Something like that happens. And the good news, the way to think about this is the way that with UCOA, that we, when we implemented UCOA, before we would group everything together. So it was very difficult for anybody to see, especially the Board of Finance. You just look at this information once a month. So, for example, with the police department, I know I told you this, when we were setting that up, I requested that it be broken down into these
three areas so that we could see, because then the budget becomes more transparent. So, and we did that in the Department of Public Works, we did that in Recreation. So I think, you know, with respect to your question, you know, if the money is still getting spent, I'm not gonna debate that, it is getting spent, but you can see it. And that helps Carl, that helps me, because we're the ones that are looking at this information and we can see what's going on, and they do have to come to us, or to Carl.
They do. I
Sometimes they
mean,
come to Carl and they go,
I can't think of too many instances within the year that it happens. You're right, the chief reports more to the police commission on this. Over the years, in past years, but not all that recently, he, you know, would mention to me, hey, you know, I might have this part of the budget is way underspent, and would it be great to get new bulletproof vests, you know? I want to make this expenditure, but now that is definitely being run more through the police commission. But I think, to Leanne's point, with the budgets being broken down into these sub-departments as a result of the uniform charts of account implementation, it makes budgets to some extent smaller, each budget, each of the sub-department budgets. So, and it really like identifies where personnel is coming from and where snowplow is coming from, or snow plowing is. So anyway.
Yeah,
Long-winded answer.
And I appreciate the answer because I have a better understanding. I think to some extent, this stems from the policy you mentioned a little while ago, Leanne, which is the policy of requiring full funding for positions. Because if we didn't do that, that would then, I think, allow for the department head to be a little more accurate, shall I say, around what the actual expenditures are going to be in some of the more general expenditure areas. But when you know that you've got full funding and there's $1 million or $100,000 sitting up there on the top line that isn't going to be spent, then annually you come in and say, this expenditure line item is going to be $15,000. 1 year actual expenditure is 65, another year 110, only because you know you have the money available. So I don't know who set that policy to say that we need to fully fund every position, but I don't think that's been the experience. And so, but that's the beginning, I think, of the slippery slope that now we're talking.
So we do fully, I mean, every position in town hall is going to be funded because, you know, we may lose a person, or Public Works is a better example. He has a small crew. He's got a small enough crew right now, 9 or 10 guys. We've had a hell of a time finding maintainer twos. It's hard to find guys we're interviewing people, but Bill's got to want to hire them. So we are understaffed as a maintainer two right now. I mean, I would implore you not to take that position away in the budget and then say, if you hire a guy, we'll add it back. The police department, I think if you were to go back 15 years, probably hasn't had 25 cops, and that's their authorization.
Right.
So are we, you know, and then it gets to the point, how differently are we treating them than other departments? So to George's question though, on general expenditures, 540, the budget was 542. I think if we were to go back and look at that budget, I'm willing to bet that if we had 25 cops in here, that 542 would not be 150,000 overexpended, and that he would make it to that line item a lot more closely. But knowing that he might have had the room elsewhere, he might have expended money the chief may have expended money out of that budget. But I don't think I truly don't, and I have to go back and look at the budget book that you referred to. I don't think he is purposely underfunding general expenditures. I don't.
he's
Because
not, yeah, no.
I just think he's exceeding that line item.
Right.
knowing that within the department, he will still be within budget. So,
And the other thing, you know, we focus on the police department, but as Carl said, we have to think about the whole of the organization. And, you know, in the case where you have a department that has maybe like Public Works, that has a few people, versus it's clear if you only have 2 people and somebody's not there, you can't underfund that position. But in certain cases, you need to bring in outside resources or a consultant or, you know, other things that cost money on other line items. So it's to look at the police department as our largest department, and it wouldn't work well underfunding full employment and any other department.
Well, should the question be, where should your focus be? Should your focus be on an individual line item? Or should it be on the bottom number, that they attune their whole expenditure base to that bottom number, that it's all been approved?
Right.
I think
Right.
both. I think both. I think it's fair to look at the individual line items too.
I'm not saying not to look, because that's how you set your budget. But from a business standpoint, you go through the budget process, but you're always focused on that bottom number. At least in my business.
Right.
But I'm gonna now take a little bit of the other side. Completely agree. But when you see $150,000, I don't disagree with everybody here that it's like, wow, that department must be way under, or however much it's over. You know, 542, and there's been 835 expended. You know, it's a fair question.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
So couldn't that be because of a shortage of men? You have to pay them.
I don't know, yeah,
Unfortunately, it doesn't come out.
I don't think it comes out of that.
No, that you would see that in
Field,
field.
that's in field service.
So, you know, maybe both the chief and the chairman of the police commission, you know, can talk about this.
Might be a conversation. Okay.
So,
Oops, I'm
so
sorry.
with the, I mean, the only thing I'm concerned about is with these 3 different budgets within the department. You know, I don't think it would be wise for us to micromanage each line item.
Oh, no.
Or if we were, we would have to approve them separately. Because right now we approved one line, one number. So wherever these 3 end up, as long as it's under or at the budget, it's okay. Now, the school department, they have one number they give us, and they can do exactly what is going on here. And it's a state statute, and we can't mess with it.
Just as long as we're being philosophical about this. I don't know if we were to set a standard of not fully funding, how we would determine what standard we go to and what kind of disincentives that would give to department heads to hold back on hiring and do successor planning. Because he or she would be trying to keep a cushion in there for other expenditures, because we've tried to second guess what that real number is, that God only knows what it is. Nobody knows. I mean, you could come up with some formula, but it would be a hit and miss type thing. So I just about any organization that I've ever been involved with, you fund full employment. And full employment of what you expect to need. You don't want to fund yourself below what you expect to need. And then you get into all sorts of dead ends.
We could get philosophical here.
When I say crooked, I don't mean dishonest, I mean
No.
crooked roads down the path.
Are there other questions? Megan, you started us off down this.
Yeah.
Well, it stood out to me,
Yeah,
and
it does. It
I'm
does.
still learning, but yeah, I think in general, the point is, when we approve these budgets, it is a final number, but we're looking at the different line items, so, I mean, ideally, we would get pretty close to that number, and in each category that, I mean, I'm not saying we don't fully fund positions, but,
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Paul's comment here about being philosophical, right? But I think, I'm trying to think about the way the school budget is done. I mean, I have experience with that, and so, at the end of the day, the school returns, they fund what they think they need, and at the end of the day, they return.
Not always,
Not
but
always, but they try,
Yeah.
and to return money they don't use. And so, to your point, Paul, then we just fund them to the 25% of whatever it is. And we fund their general expenditures to whatever they actually think they're gonna need. And if at the end of the year, they didn't fund 25%, whatever it is, then we turn that portion of money back, right? Then at that point, then everything is more transparent in terms of this is the cost it take to fund 25 people, how many it is, this is the cost to run this police department, and we didn't use it all because of whatever reason, and we were turning it back.
Right.
And that's what happens.
So I have a question with,
If, from these three line items, my addition shows that he's got a surplus
well, so far.
of $250,000, and if that is still there, it's gonna come back to the
It won't
town.
be,
He's
but I
not,
mean, the
he's
police,
not gonna do the New Britain Board of Education thing and the last day of the month of the fiscal year, spend every dollar you got on toilet paper and
the police department is generally
copy paper.
returned funds. to the
Yeah.
town.
So it comes back, and as long as we've got it broken down and the first selectman knows. And we have good department heads that are telling him that
And the
I'm gonna
reason
spend it, and this is what I wanna spend it
we
on.
can have this discussion because it is broken out.
Yeah.
Into those three categories,
Right.
and we can drill down deeper if we need to.
so I have a question about, you said he asked for money for, if it was guns or vests.
That was an example,
Okay.
maybe years ago, I don't.
So is this all in a plan, like the cars are a plan every, say, 4 years?
Well, I mean, they're on a schedule, typically guns are replaced. You know what, I'm not even gonna say how often.
Or the vests.
Like vests are too, they age out.
Right.
And, yeah,
So there is a plan on that.
But
Maybe
like-
sometime you should share that with us.
so like the schools, and maybe like another department, I can't think of a good example right now, sometimes you say, the money, I have it in this fiscal year. It'll save me that capital expense next year, I'm gonna do it, and, we'll use that money maybe for something else next year, so, it does happen. We can drill down into it also.
Any other questions on this? George?
I do, and then totally off the top, not related to the police department at all, but just coming back to, I appreciate the summary that you write on the ARPA every year. I know you didn't make any comment on it, but it comes back to your comment about, we have a surplus and so on. I'm just wondering, most of it, of course, is interest, but I'm also wondering how much of that is based on not having to spend what the ARPA paid for, right? And so, because I'm thinking if ARPA wasn't available and some of these items came up, that we still should be supporting that.
Not many, I could think of some park and rec projects perhaps that we would have gone to capital non-recurring for. But I don't know that there are a bunch of others that would have shown up in the budget or in capital non-recurring. I'm sure there are a couple. I mean, we did put some money in for Main Street crosswalks, $500,000.
Right.
That's a different discussion we'll have on how we might have to move some money around on that. But anyway, I don't think, Park and Rec, obviously, we invested with our funds.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anything else you would like to tell us about your finance director's report?
I'm done with finance director, yes.
All right, well, then we will move on to the next item, which
Yeah.
is, Leanne.
Yeah.
Why don't you just give us just a quick background as to how we got here,
Okay.
assuming that we've all read the new policy.
Well, it's all because of John O'Brien.
That's,
Yes, and yes, no, it's a good outcome, it's a good outcome, I think. So, he shared with me this memo that was from 2007. About, and here's just one line item, the budget, and by the way, he has also told me that this was not officially approved, correct? Am I correct in that?
Just a brief history on that.
Yeah.
I went back and checked.
Yeah.
The minutes from 1107 to 12/31/07, and there was no statement in the minutes referring to a policy. There was a discussion, and in the top right-hand corner of September, what is this day? September 18th.
Yeah.
There was a one-line statement that Carl would write a memo on this subject. Not to mention. This might be the
No memo.
memo, I don't know. But
It sounds like.
nobody ever
Yeah.
made this a policy.
Yeah.
According, and Carl was right about that.
So the memo states the budget approved for any fiscal year, any approved supplemental appropriation for each department shall not be exceeded without prior approval of the Board of Finance and if necessary, a town meeting. And as we can all see here, sometimes these budgets do go over, and I don't know that we necessarily would have advance notice of it. But having seen this policy, I went to the GFOA, Government Financial Officers Association, and they give a lot of guidance on policies, and all the other Board of Finance policies that are in there have come from their preferred practices for managing municipalities. So I did research that, and I made this policy that you have in front of you. And, you know, it's all about monitoring the budget. Really, it's what we do every single month. But I did, here's the guidance that I have. It's actually 6 pages long, and I did incorporate all of this into the budget monitoring policy. So it says, you know, that you actually have to have monitor the revenues. The revenues are set by the Board of Selectmen during the budget process. And a few of the key points, and Carl actually touched upon some of them already, is our collection rate for taxes that we have abided by for all of these years is in the policy. We should be able to refer back to that for you know, forever if we have a monitoring policy in place. But the Board of Finance does approve the mill rate. We talked about the state grants. We know they tell us how much we're going to get, but we've had bad experience in the past where they haven't given us all that, and it's made our budget go up. So we apply a reasonable percentage. And same thing with local revenues. And we've been talking a lot about the interest income, that we apply a reasonable assumption. We do not want these revenues to go up, down, up, down, up, down in one half, because we don't want it to affect the mill rate in a positive and negative manner. The expenditure management part of the budget, and as noted in the practices of GFOA, during the budget process, you should talk about personnel costs, fringe benefits, operations, capital, all of those things. And we do talk about all of those things during the budget process. So this policy really, at this time, it codifies what our practice is. It also says in the GFOA that you have to monitor performance, and what are you going to do if it goes out of whack. So this policy states that on a monthly basis, the finance director will look at budget to actual. We also look at where we were last year, so we have a little bit of a basis for comparison purposes. So that's how our report is: budget, actual, last year. And I do discuss any budgets that are nearing the full budgeted amount. If I see something, I'll usually call up the department head and say, hey, what's going on? Report that to you. This policy, I didn't write in here that it would be a mandate that if something happens that the department head will come in. I wrote that it would be at the discretion of the Board of Finance, because maybe you don't want somebody to come in for a $1,000 overage. I don't know, but that's up to you. But it is the mechanism by which to call upon a department head to come in and to discuss what is the root cause of that overage, the timeframe, and anything else that might be affecting that budget line item. And then, of course, noting that emergency funds can be used, and actually that was part of the original memo that John had that line item in there, and I just popped that in there because that is true. Sometimes we have states of emergencies, sometimes we have other types of emergencies, and then the first selectman would probably come to the Board of Finance after the fact and explain it and say, hey, we went over budget. And then we know we have town charter and town codes that have that $25,000 already elsewhere, so I didn't put it in here. But if it goes over 25,000, then we have to do something. We have to either appropriate, you all have to appropriate something, or we have to do a transfer from one budget line item to another. If we have an overage someplace, we want to put that elsewhere. If we don't want to add more money to the budget, that would be what would happen. And Carl and I would come forth and recommend that for your consideration in those events that they do happen. So that is, in a nutshell, a quick overview. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right, and this had been distributed, so people had a chance to read it. Are there any questions of Leanne?
Well, I just have a more general question about just policy generally. First of all, thank you for that explanation. And this is incredibly well written. My general question is this, and I apologize for keep bringing back, my experience of Board of Ed, but Board of Ed policies run the school, right? I mean, there's actually subcommittees that just do policies, nothing else, and we actually hire a legal firm just to help us with the language of policies and whatever can change, right? It's absolutely crazy, and it's so much of it's state mandated, so it's almost impossible to keep up. My question is, does something like that exist on the town side where there are legal requirements that we gotta maintain? And if yes, do we have a mechanism where some firm is looking out for us in terms of whether we have the adequate set of policies in place, and maybe that and so on, right?
So that happens mostly in HR. We have an HR lawyer focus on HR issues. We do our employee policies. Carl works with a lawyer to redo our contracts for negotiations for all of our unions, which are about 99% of our employees. Town business is a lot different than school business. And as the contracts, employee contracts motivate a huge amount of what ends up in our budget, that's, well, I guess that's not really necessarily a policy answer, but yes, on those large issues, we have outside legal help with contracts and employee issues.
But on a policy like this, not necessarily. I mean, as Leanne said, so the Board of Finance is a statutory creature, and the GFOA has best practices, and it's not that, I mean, I don't want to give Leanne all the credit in the world, but it's not overly difficult, I think, to craft the necessary policies. If we needed to, we could certainly have them reviewed by council. Our new council, Bertram Moses, I'm sure would be happy to review Board of Finance policies. I don't know that it's necessary as long as we're compliant with best practices.
And our auditors review.
Yes,
those
yes,
policies.
I was gonna say, doesn't that
Yeah.
already happen in that whole audit
Yes.
process
This
anyway?
is very, yes, exactly, Megan. We're more financial. And so our policies are more finance driven. So best practices, audits, things like that's different in the school.
Perfect.
Any other comments or questions about the policy being recommended?
Just the section there on the collection rate.
Mhm.
Does that lock us into that? Or do we always want to be locked into a 99% collection rate?
That's a good point. I wanted to make the point that that's what it is so that it would be codified, but I think that perhaps we could edit that or to make it a little bit more evergreen, that we target 99% and it is established every year or something like that.
So you maybe could do something with that language, or policies can be amended also. So there may come a year where, you know what, we need to reduce this to that. I don't want that to come, but 98%.
But we have had that rate, and I don't typically, I try to make things more evergreen, but we've had that rate forever. And it is a reflection of our town, our economy, our stability, you know, it's almost philosophical.
It's a goal or a target.
Yeah. But something, when you put some.
Yes.
You're right.
In a hard number.
Yeah.
That's good. So why don't we just modify that sentence, say these revenues will be targeted to a 99% collection rate, and then.
Yep.
That gives us the flexibility.
I kind of want to start.
Okay, anything else? Hearing none, take a motion to approve this policy.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Made and seconded, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Leanne, thank you very much for your work. John, thank you so much for bringing it to our attention.
Oh, I'm sure.
Now,
Great record.
17 years from now, you're gonna come back.
17 years.
Yeah.
And you can
It
say
shows
we
you're a
actually
great record
voted on it.
That's right, that's
I
right.
was alive to vote on it.
I don't need some more.
Jerry, the minutes were reflect, we did vote on it this time. Okay, we are, Carl?
Yeah, this is the registrar. So, Joan Broadhurst came into my office and said, for fiscal, now we're in fiscal 25. So let's be clear about that. She said, you know, we're being paid $14,000 this year. Westbrook just upped their registrars to 20 grand. And I think we're just gonna have to start bumping these registrars up a little bit higher, especially with the presidential coming up. They are there all the time. They determine how it's gonna be staffed, but probably paying them $14,000 for what is going to be happening over the course of the next 6 months. Probably not enough money now that we have early voting, like it or not. But, you know, we wanna make sure we run a tight ship, a good ship, no mistakes. I did talk to Joan the other day. The primaries in whenever they were, March, were definitely a learning experience, and they probably overstaffed and may have spent a little bit more than they needed to. That was basically conceded, but they had no idea what to expect. And I think we have a better idea as to how that might roll out in the future. But there is no question that the presidential election, I think you'll have an incredibly steady stream of people coming into town hall. I guess the gist of the memo is, well, the idea behind the memo was, let's bump them this year. So you'd be adding to the fiscal 25 budget on this line item, the amounts as indicated. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is just bump the registrar salaries, and we'll leave them there when we go into the budgeting for next year. What I was talking about is bump them, and then we start from the fiscal, the original fiscal 25 number in the budgeting season, and then start taking them up $2,000 a year in the coming years until we get them to a number that we think is appropriate for Old Saybrook early voting. The other idea is to just add the money, and then either way, we're gonna revisit it in budget season. If the Board of Finance tonight says yes to this, we can revisit what we shall pay them in fiscal 26 in the spring and say, hey, we don't think in a municipal election or gubernatorial election that we're gonna need quite so much money in the budget. So we're gonna go from the original fiscal 25 number of 14,000, whatever it is, 14,626, take them up each to 16,626, and then maybe in 27, fiscal 27, take them up to 18. So that was the idea, is to bump them slowly as we get up, but for the presidential election, I think they're gonna be busy as heck. I think there's gonna be just a lot of work. I think there's gonna be a lot of registration. I mean, you know, I don't need to make a political comment for people to figure that one out. So,
Brett?
So I have a question.
yeah,
We know the election year for the presidential is gonna be more,
yes,
but then the next 3 years will be down.
yes. So that's what I'm saying. We can
So
take it
why-
down after.
So you're gonna go up and then back down again?
Well, that is actually what the memo says.
Yeah.
The memo says is go up, and then in fiscal 26, you can decide what you want to pay them.
Is it,
Why wouldn't you leave it as, just a suggestion, at where it is, but then keep track of their hours and pay them accordingly?
Could do that.
Because then, I mean, it's hard to say to somebody, you made, say, 2 years from now, it's 18,626. But then we're gonna cut you back to 14 because
Yeah.
there's less work, so.
We could do a budget appropriation at a later date too. This was requested. And it's in anticipation of the hours that we think they're gonna be working. And
So why wouldn't we pay them the hours that they're gonna be working, so that it's fair and square?
that's actually, the memo anticipates what they will be working
Right.
for fiscal 25. It does, the additional,
is there a hybrid approach that
probably.
when we talked about this a year ago?
Yeah.
They came in and I think we increased by 1,000 or there's some small amount, but you had done some research and the
Yeah.
plan was exactly what you're saying. Over a period of time, we will bump it. So what about the idea of so going from the 14,626 and saying for fiscal year 25, they will be at 16,626, but recognizing that there will be extra effort associated with the early voting for both the primary as well as the election, and doing the $25 an hour for that. So that effectively a year from now, then they know their base salary was 16, whatever, and that, they got extra because they did the extra work, but if they're not gonna do the extra work, then they don't get that extra. So but we're also fulfilling what I think was that commitment of we're gonna bump up over a period of time.
I think early voting in general is going to bump registrar pay all across the state.
Right.
Period. So I just want to see these folks be appropriately compensated for kind of a lot of hours and a bit of a thankless task. So I'm open to the conversation as to how the Board of Finance would like to do it.
Okay, George?
Just so I understand the terminology in terms of where periods end and begin. Okay, so right now in your last budget report, assuming it's the same people, both registrar voters is already $8,000 over.
No,
Going to be $8,000. So we're in fiscal year 25 now, which I haven't given you any reports yet next month.
No, I mean, so this is line item 41,900.
Yeah, this is last fiscal year.
Understood.
Yeah.
So as of fiscal year 24, year to date, they've already spent $8,000 more than
Yes,
we budgeted.
yes, because of an early voting thing that was
That's
implemented.
great, that's fine. And so, and then this fall's election will be paid out of fiscal year 25.
Correct.
And so so they're already short, right?
Yes.
no, they're not already short. The budget year just began. What they are asking for is to be compensated for hours that they anticipate working. So they're saying, the registrars basically are saying, look, we know what we went through in the primary, which is not that busy, but what we expect and what we have to do for the presidential. And unfortunately, there's a Republican Senate primary. We anticipate we're gonna have to work this many hours. Now, they're a salaried position. They're salaried. We could say, no, you 14,000, that's what you get. I just don't know that that's the right thing to do.
Would that be a labor law situation? I mean, if they say they're working 40 hours and we're paying them
Their
less.
salary.
It's an elected position. I mean,
I don't know, I just,
we can make the same argument for me. No, I'm kidding. That was a joke. That was a joke. Yeah.
It is an elected position, and there are rules surrounding giving pay raises to elected officials during their term of office or decreasing their salaries during terms of office. One thing, I think we might run into trouble if we increase them now and then 2 years from now, 1 year from now, decrease them.
Yeah, we're not gonna, I don't recommend decreasing it. That would be, it's in here, but it was
Now,
just,
did we check out
no.
how many times we can give them raises or, they're up for reelection this year or next year?
Right, this year.
The next year.
They're on the ballot. Oh, wait, they're on the ballot this year.
They
They're
are.
on the ballot this year, and
They're on the ballot in
Yes.
November.
traditionally you give an elected official a raise the year they're on the ballot,
Okay, right.
okay? That's how
But
it
then you
works
can't,
usually.
but then after that, I believe
Oh,
you can't reduce their pay.
yeah,
Or
okay.
in the instance where it's a 4-year term, you may increase their pay again halfway through their term.
Okay,
Can you pay them for the hours they work?
I don't-
Over and above?
I don't know that.
I don't know.
So maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe we should look at this a little bit more carefully.
Yeah.
And
Sounds
maybe
like-
we should table it.
Sounds like there may be some guidance.
We have time.
Yeah.
We have time.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree with the concept that they should be raised with all the extra work, but I didn't want to give them a raise in pay and then 5 months from now, somebody from the state telling us, you did it the wrong way.
Yeah.
They have to go back to 14 too.
Okay, so why don't we,
I'll take a
why
look
don't
at
we
that.
table this?
Yep,
And we
I'll take a
will
look at it.
get back at the next meeting or whenever it's appropriate.
I have I had requested, which Leanne sent out about the early voting information.
Yes.
And I'd like to have that into the minutes. I think the public needs to know. I mean, I know it's mandated and we gotta do it, but I think people need to know what the expenses, so that they're aware of it.
I think there was
Because,
an article in Harvard News, right?
Yes.
I think-
yeah, and I think it should be recorded within our jurisdiction.
So the email that you're talking about?
Yes, the email that
I remember seeing.
that
I
she
did
sent
send-
out, it should be
yeah.
part of the minutes so that people are aware of the actual cost.
Sure, I have no problem with that, and I think that will set the precedent for taking a look at both the Republican primary as well as the presidential election. And we do a comparison.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. We're on to the selectmen
All right.
report.
Thank you. Norm Wood, our longtime assessor, has moved on to actually another municipality. But, we had a nice party for Norm. We'll miss Norm. Norm was a wonderful guy, a really good town worker. But with change comes opportunity. We have somebody who is training to be the next assessor. We'll be taking the test in October. One of the things I said to Norm before he left, I said, we're gonna be without an assessor. Can a town be without an assessor? And he goes, the town I'm going to hasn't had an assessor in a year and a half. I'm like, oh. But once you get through reval, and we got through reval, he said you should be fine. So we're hopeful that Bridget Reardon, who is in classes to become the next assessor, will test for it, will be the next, well, if she passes the test, she will apply for the job. and, we'll do an interview, but we're not actively seeking an assessor right now in the hopes that someone who has worked in that office and is familiar with the town can, take over that position. I'm just letting the cat out of the bag on that. The Conservation Management Commission had I thought really, I don't know who was at the public hearing on the Preserve Forest Management Plan, anybody?
I heard about
What's that?
it. I heard about it.
Yeah, I'll say this much, it was an excellent meeting, it was very well attended, really good questions, I thought DEP did a super job talking, and one thing that I thought was great about it was the civil discourse. Everything was polite, it reflected very well on the town, because there are issues with regard to hunting and silviculture that are hot button issues, and people handled themselves wonderfully. Deep did, our citizens did. It was a really good discussion, about an hour and a half. And there'll be follow-up to that. The final report with comments will be coming out before too long. So very good meeting there. Celebrate Saybrook, I don't think we talked about that. Our street party, I thought was a pretty darn good success. A lot of compliments on it. We've already had our first debrief on what went right, what went wrong, some ideas for next year. So we're already tossing some ideas around. June 22nd, 2025 is the idea
That's
for next year. We've already
Should we
set the
put that
date.
on our calendar?
Yep, and just so you know, the thought that goes into that is not too close to July 4th when
Yeah.
either people it's very separate and distinct from July 4th. It does compete with the Travelers Golf Tournament now every year, as long as that remains an elevated event on the PGA Tour. But June 22nd, 2025, we are still in negotiations with our support union. We've had 2 meetings, amicable, not a lot of headway, but we're moving. We have more negotiations planned for July and August. There's a public hearing on the Amtrak replacement bridge Thursday night at the Duffy Pavilion. Unfortunately, I cannot be there. I am going to try to attend remotely. I'm just taking a few days off Thursday and Friday. That is a Thursday night at the Pavilion, $1.3 billion job over the course of the next 6 to 7 years. It's a big project. I don't know how disruptive it will be in the river, but I think some of the questions and answers will be some of the questions asked, hopefully some answers, but it's not the first rodeo for O&G who won the bid. They're very good at this, and I'm sure Amtrak has replaced many bridges over rivers. That bridge is over 100 years old, has to be replaced. It'll be good for Old Saybrook.
Question, do you know if they're gonna do the same type of bridge, or you don't have any idea?
Same type of bridge, yes, higher. It's gonna be a little bit higher, 90 feet south.
And yeah, but I mean, is it gonna twist, doesn't that twist now? Or does it open up? I can't, it opens up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if any of you have walked through our park behind the pickleball court. It's open to walk through. I encourage it. It's really wonderful to see that space now usable for the public. I've gone through it a few times and I see people walking their dogs, taking strolls through it. You got to see these bocce courts. It's amazing. The design, we have benches, we have seating at each end of the bocce court that will protect you from sunlight. We had some tree work done there to cut some of the overhanging branches.
Do you have a scoreboard?
There will be a scoreboard with the town seal on it.
Maybe
Yeah,
if it gets less
absolutely.
hot. we can
A lot.
go.
This is very well.
Not so hot.
It is, look, I played bocce 10 times in my life, so, but it will be, I think, a really nice downtown amenity, passive park. Substantial completion will probably be next week. There'll be some final items that they have to, punch list items that they have to go through. but I would encourage you to just take a walk through it if you're walking downtown. I worked on, over the last 2 months, a bid for our municipal solid waste and recyclables and our commercial and demolition waste. I sit on the board of the MIRA Dissolution Authority, formerly MIRA, and the attitude amongst the board is very Hartford-centric, and they could not really care all that much about the 22 remaining MIRA towns, which are mostly in the southeast and the northwest. Right now, we're paying about $140 a ton to dispose of MSW and recyclables. That is actually a stabilized fee that is subsidized through a fund that MIRA holds that they are required to stabilize to the towns that are in MIRA still through June of 27. The board of directors, and I'm in the vast minority there in terms of my position, has basically said they will not subsidize the 22 remaining towns in fiscal 26 and 27, despite the fact that there is a contract that we have that says they will. So just in an abundance of caution, because I don't know what the future of the Essex transfer station will be. I don't know if it's gonna continue to work as a transfer station or if what will happen there. So I put out an RFP with a response date, I think it's August 8th or so. And the RFP asks for within a 20-mile radius, we will drive, because we have a roll-off truck, we will drive MSW recyclables and C&D to a disposal facility. And I asked for 5 years worth of prices based on the fact that we will do the transportation. As an addendum, which I did late last week, I said, if companies want to bid on transportation and disposal, now that would become a union negotiation issue, because right now, transportation is union work in the town of Old Saybrook. But I think that would be something we could successfully negotiate. But I did open it up for bidding for transportation and disposal. So more to come on this, but it's kind of a big deal. Garbage and recyclables and C&D is just not on anyone's radar. And unfortunately, it's been on my radar now for 7 or 8 years in a very big way. We were paying $50 a ton 10 years ago. It's going to be $180 a ton before we know it. And, there's no, in my opinion, good future for refuse disposal anytime in the next 5, 6, 7 years in the state of Connecticut, other than transporting it to Ohio or burning it in the remaining facilities, if you can actually get into those facilities, because they're full. And those facilities are aging out. We face a crisis in the state of Connecticut, and the answer is not diversion of recyclables, more recyclables. The holy grail is food waste, but I'm not even sure that would solve the problem. But the fact is, it's a very difficult path to getting people to either compost or dispose of their food so that it can be used for something like biodiesel, because we don't have the infrastructure in the state of Connecticut for people to bring their food disposal to. I mean, we might all have a bin in our garage with all our food scraps, but you got to take it somewhere. Now, at our transfer station, you can do that, but it's not readily available to the citizens of the state of Connecticut. And the cities and apartment buildings are dead set against this. So there's a problem here. In the short term, I'm trying to see if we can get price stability over the course of the next 5 years. We would start this contract in July 1 of 2025. If we had an attractive bidder, I would opt out of the Mira contract, which I can do. I think the board of directors of the Mira Dissolution Authority would be thrilled if we did, because they are just trying to get rid of all these towns. Anyway, that's, any question? Yeah.
I have a question. Like in Indian Town, they have trash collection in the summer.
Yeah.
Have we looked into the idea of the whole town doing that type of thing, and then maybe we could cut down the facility, or other towns have pretty high fees where we're pretty low. I mean, you look at Guilford.
You mean low for our transfer station, which is free?
Right.
Yes,
You go down,
that's low.
you go down to Madison, Guilford, it's expensive.
So, two different comments you made there. One of them is curbside pickup.
Right.
For the entire town. I haven't explored that. I know Old Lyme does it and they bid it out recently. I haven't done that. I'm not so sure that would be, I don't know what that would save. I'm not sure. It's certainly something we can look at. I think if you were to basically get rid of our transfer station or try to implement fees at our transfer station, I don't think that would pass at a town meeting, to be honest with you.
It will be so.
Because that's what would have to happen.
If you had this pickup service though, less likely a lot of people wouldn't have to go there, except for.
Pickup service is $200 a quarter or so. Right now it's free for 50% of the town. I'm not arguing with you.
I'm not saying do it, I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's a good thought. So.
It is a great presentation. I have so many questions related to just this topic, but if we went on this conversation, it will be complete tangent to the Board of Finance.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and bring this back to actually a Board of Finance topic. But let me see if I can understand what you said. So if I can sort of paraphrase what I understood, the intent is you want to get out of Mira and you want to basically create an alternative plan that this town will fund. And you mentioned something about a 20-mile radius. And
we would be funding it within our current budget.
Understood.
Yeah.
But then you also mentioned the Essex transfer station. I'm not sure how that brought in terms of whether we would actually support other towns. And then the question comes in then is there a particular break point that you needed towns to come in and pay and so on to make this a viable option?
So I would say anywhere between, and it's a public meeting, so I don't want to, I don't want to say what, I don't want to say what we should be paying price per ton. I'd rather see what the bids come in, assuming we're going to get bids. Why don't I just say that publicly? You know what, I could go on this, and it would be way off topic, because through our Council of Governments, which represents 16 towns, we received a state grant for $600,000. They did, to try to stand up a regional waste authority, try to create it's the $600,000 is money to create a regional waste authority around the Essex transfer station. So, in other words, the towns that currently go to the Essex transfer station, there's about 10 of them. And when a town, we drive everything to the Essex transfer station, and then it gets transported to Preston to be burned. That's how it works right now. Creating our own regional waste authority is not a simple thing. You have to have an executive director. You have to have contracts in place to guarantee the amount of waste that you're going to deliver there so that it's worthwhile for anyone operating that to actually make money transporting it and disposing of it. It's complicated, and it's been recognized as such by Norm Needleman, who they own the land on which that transfer station sits. Norm has some decisions to make as to whether he wants that traffic to continue in his town, what he wants to do with that site. I think he's very much in favor of a regional waste authority, but it has to favor terms that he finds acceptable as the first selectman of Essex. What I'm doing is trying to make sure that we have a place to send our garbage next year. That's all I'm trying to do.
And the door is shut.
I mean, people want to say, go. That's all they want to know. It goes. Truly. They don't, so that's what I'm trying to, that's my basic purpose right now. I'll let you know how that plays out. If the bids are not good or I get no bids, then we have to start talking about what we're gonna do, and hopefully it'll involve the Essex transfer station. I immediately let the COG know and Senator Needleman know that I put out an RFP, because I didn't want to blindside anybody on that, and because Old Saybrook leaving would basically kill, I think, hopes of the regional waste authority. If we were to take our garbage in a different direction. So right now, you're forcing me to do this, and I'm sorry to everybody. Under MIRA, there's what they call flow control. So not only does the town deliver its MSW and recyclables to the Essex transfer station, but all the haulers in town must go to the Essex transfer station to guarantee a certain tonnage for the operator of that station to take to Preston to burn it. This RFP would potentially remove Old Saybrook not only from the Essex transfer station, but would release the haulers to go wherever they chose to with the garbage from Knollwood or anywhere else. That's a big deal to the haulers. They would prefer to go to wherever they want and they can get the best price. So, getting rid of flow control is a big deal for them, and it's a big decision statewide. The good thing about flow control and getting all these contracts together is you need a critical mass for somebody to do something efficiently. And the state, I believe, is being very short-sighted in not coming up with, not investing in probably burn plants, to be honest with you, in the state of Connecticut. That's really the only way that garbage is going to get efficiently disposed of. And, all right, let's.
Are there other issues that you would like to report on?
I'm sorry, but it's an issue that I've had a deep dive into over the last 5 to 8 years. And I'm pretty passionate about it because one more thing on this.
Go for it.
What we're doing right now, what the state of Connecticut is doing, not Old Saybrook, the state of Connecticut is doing with a significant amount of its waste is shipping it on diesel trucks using tires to Ohio and Kentucky. How does that make sense as a policy in the state of Connecticut?
Hartford just bought, no, was it New Haven or Hartford? New Haven or Hartford just bought their first I thought of you when I saw it on the news. I said, Carl would love this. They bought their first electric garbage truck.
So,
I said, Carl Fortuna needs this.
so no, I don't.
You love garbage.
So,
Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
Yes, he just loves
Is there anything else you'd like to?
we're gonna probably have a memo shortly on end of year, recommendations to the Board of Finance, take to a town meeting perhaps. And that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, got it. Any questions? Any different? Hearing none, let's move on. Liaison reports, are there any liaison reports? Seeing none, comments from board members?
I just wanted to ask, I had brought up back in January, February about talking about our responsibilities.
Yep, it's gonna be one of our meeting agenda items coming up in the fall.
In fall. Okay.
Yep. So thank you for bringing that up. We do not have any public comment, so we're to comments from the chair. just, it was referenced earlier in the meeting, I just want to reinforce the fact that we have invited the pension board and others on August 6th, and hopefully we can all make that meeting and hear what they have to say. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. Also, at the last meeting, I believe I asked for just a one-pager on what the economics of the police contract are.
I'm still working on that.
Okay,
I had to get some numbers from Chuck, and he's been on vacation for the,
okay,
sorry about that.
so if that could come, that would be great. That's all for me, so motion to, oh, Jerry.
The August sixth meeting has
Oh,
to be upstairs in the second floor conference room, which there's not a whole lot of room up there.
Do we know how
So
many
we're
guests
having
we're gonna have?
company,
We'll just have to reroute
Oh,
the
is it because of early voting?
Yeah,
public.
which is gonna be
Or
down here.
training or something.
Why don't we make early voting up there?
No, they.
Oh, no, they can't, they need this room. So I just wanted to.
yeah, that's a great point, Jerry. Thank you.
I mean, it's just Kevin, right?
I don't know.
Well,
Kevin
what,
and
is
Daryl.
Daryl gonna come? Just
Kevin
Daryl?
and
We're both gonna be here.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
Should
Daryl's
be- should
definitely
be
coming.
okay.
We'll figure it out.
You got the AC cranked up.
Well, by the way, we have been, town hall's been a little warm and we're hopeful that that new unit, which is scheduled to ship this week and be installed in the shoulder season, September, October, that was funded by the Board of Finance, will be installed in a few months. Hopefully that'll cool the building better than it's being cooled right now, but it's awfully hot. And we have so many we're directly west facing,
Yeah,
so those offices get hot.
well, let's hope this really big heat wave breaks.
Yeah.
Would be nice. Okay, let's, motion to adjourn.
So,
Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
what, yeah.